us on Shannons Club TV, the show where all motoring enthusiasts can share a blast from the past on Australian roads and racetracks.
In each episode of Shannons Club TV, we delve into the rich local heritage of our feature car, and we'll meet a proud enthusiast. And as an owner, you could even end up being a star of the show. And on the Shannons Club website, you can also find previous episodes, along with the full road and race histories by Mark Oastler and myself.
So let's take a look at the car you'd have chosen in the 1950s if you needed something bigger and tougher than a Holden, the Ford Customline.
After World War II ended, Ford's proposal to build an all-Australian car based on a reworked version of its 1930s Ford V8 model was predictably rejected by the Australian government. It was a long way short of the first Holden with its unitary body and more efficient overhead valve inline 6 that was chosen instead. Yet the Ford V8 still had a solid following in Australia. Jack Murray's famous victory in the 1954 Red X trial with his 7-year-old Ford V8 highlighted the ongoing relevance of a full chassis Ford V8 to a wide cross-section of Australians. After the locally assembled 1949 Ford Custom single spinner gave Australians a tantalising glimpse into the future, it was the first Customline in 1952 that captivated Australians of all ages. For its arrival, Ford had ramped up local content to the required 85% for a local flavour all of its own at a competitive price. Sleek up-to-the-minute US styling, upmarket Australian leather and wood finish cabin, and a locally made V8 engine with almost double the horsepower of a Holden. It was welcomed as a fresh, value-packed leaf above its ageing opposition. Unlike its closest local rivals from Chrysler, Ford Australia facelifted it every year in line with US models. Mark, if you're an Australian competing in motorsport at any level, these first Customlines were affordable, strong and consistent performers, yet they never quite ended up on the winners' podiums. Why was that?
Well, the side valve V8 didn't quite have enough grunt for such a big heavy car, and as we saw in the Red X trials, it took a while for Ford to get the durability into the independent front suspension that they had in the beam front axles of the pre-49 Fords. So things were going to change.
Well, that switch from beam axle to independent front end was always a problem back then. In 1954, Ford addressed the Customline's Achilles heels with a new overhead valve Y-block V8 and a groundbreaking ball joint front suspension for the American market. And although Ford Australia picked up the 1954 appearance changes, the new engine and front suspension had to wait another year for local production. By presenting the US 1954 and 1955 upgrades in one model, the Aussie 1955 Customline was a game changer. The all-new Y-block overhead valve engine, a glamorous new body with extra wheelbase and the latest wraparound glass technology, ball joint front suspension, modern dash and the latest vinyl trim lifted local suppliers to new levels at a time when Holden was still offering the FJ. As Australian petrol went up in quality, more horsepower was unleashed from the Y-block V8. By 1956, the local Ford Customline with the latest US body changes and a big lift in performance was ready to take on all comers, even if it did retain the 1955 dash for right-hand drive. Yet the full chassis toughness was still there for those who needed access to Australia's most remote and inhospitable regions. The unique Aussie mainline ute version went from strength to strength. By 1957, the US Customline was replaced by a much bigger model, not at all suited to local conditions. In its place, Ford Australia presented a unique local Customline with the extra details of the 1956 US Fairlane. It remains one of the most lavish and desirable 1950s models made in Australia. But there was more. Ford then used parts from the 55 and 56 Canadian Meteors for the glamorous 1958 Star model facelift. In 1959, the much larger US Fairlane replaced it, ending over 25 years of a tough V8 Outback tradition. Mark, it's hard to explain the impact of these big and flashy Customlines on local roads when Australia was not much more than a giant sheep paddock. But it was even weirder watching them compete on local racetracks.
It sure was, and boy, didn't they make an impact. Ford's mighty Customline V8 sedan could well have won multiple Australian Touring Car Championships had Australia's premier tin-top title been up and running a few years prior to its inception in 1960. Henry's handsome, rugged and fast family sedan, particularly the 1955 to 59 models powered by the 272 cubic inch Y-block V8, was at its competitive peak long before the ATCC existed. Those were the days when race promoters in different states would effectively set their own rules. The introduction of the ATCC in 1960, though, brought with it Australia's first national set of touring car regulations, by which time the mighty Mark I Jaguars were the cars to beat and the Customline had vanished from the showrooms. Although it did take a class win in the first Armstrong 500 held at Phillip Island in 1960, the Customline never had a chance to wear the prestigious ATCC or Bathurst 500 crown. Even so, the car affectionately known as the Cusso played a pivotal role in touring car racing's rise to prominence in Australia. Joe, the Customline's success in those early days of touring car racing, it must have really got the crowd's attention, because the car they saw win on Sunday really was the same car they could buy from their local Ford dealer on Monday.
Well, it's actually a bit more than that. If you can imagine a big, brawny country footy team coming down to play the best of the city slickers, you had your low-slung Jag, which was the smooth road car, the big Customline taking the Jag on the same territory. Yeah. What a great rural versus city, and that's how Australia was. Half rural, half city, and that divide was very, very strong then.
And the Cusso must have been a big seller in the bush.
The bush ran on Customlines in many cases.
Two of the biggest names to race Customlines in the 1950s were Cam's Gold Star champion Len Lukey and rising star Norm Beechey. Lukey was the man behind the hugely successful Lukey Mufflers exhaust brand and one of the most successful touring car drivers to compete in the pre-ATCC era, starting with a 55 Cusso specially tweaked by ace race tuner Harry Firth. Lukey started breaking records from the day this car debuted in 1955. But when it was damaged in a big rollover at Phillip Island 2 years later, Lukey simply transferred all the hot running gear into a 1956 model and kept on winning. By then, his Customline was widely regarded as the fastest sedan in Australia, a reputation he cemented in September 1957 by setting a new Australian land speed record of just over 123 miles per hour, using numerous homemade aerodynamic devices to make the car as slippery as possible. Another great Australian racing character, the irrepressible Stormin' Norm Beechey, cut his racing teeth behind the wheel of a Customline. In 1956, Beechey was just a cherub-faced 22-year-old kid, big on bravado but short on dollars and racing experience, when he appeared at his first major race meeting at Melbourne's Albert Park. It was a special event timed to coincide with the city's hosting of the Olympic Games that year. For Beechey, his decision to chance his hand racing a 55 Customline against Len Lukey in a touring car race was a date with destiny that would thrust him into the national spotlight. On that day, Beechey's naive mix of self-taught car control and courage allowed him to race wheel to wheel with an established star like Len Lukey, displaying a spectacular tail-out style of driving and natural showmanship that made him an instant crowd favourite. Beechey stunned the establishment by winning that day, after Lukey's Customline spun on the final corner and allowed Norm to power past and take the checkered flag. It was a stunning result that marked the young Melburnian as a man to watch.
And remember to join the Shannons Club, where you can connect with other enthusiasts around the country.
My name's Jason Turano, and the car behind me is a 1956 Ford Customline 4-door. The colour of the car is an original factory colour. It is a meadow mist green. The running gear in it is the original 272 Ford Y-block overhead valve V8, 3-speed manual. Original interior in it, still got the plastic over the seats. It's only done 48,500 miles from factory. To keep it up to today's specs I've had to replace the radiator and water pump to keep it going. From factory, it had no indicators in early 56 and it had no seat belts in it. But I'm not going to put seat belts in it because I don't want to affect its authenticity. It's just a really good driving car. You can go on the highway and sit on 60 mile an hour comfortable. If you want to overtake any traffic, it'll get up and go well over 60 mile an hour. As far as I'm concerned, I'll never sell it. It'll go to my kids, and it's up to the kids what they want to do. My family passion's always been about cars. My grandfather bought these cars brand new in the 50s. My dad got his very first Customline in 1968 and he's still got that car till today. The whole family's right involved. My parents drive Customlines every day now. That's their everyday car. And whenever we go out, we take one of the Customlines out. It's all style, class, colour, the pastels, the chrome, the fins, the V8 sound that you'll never get again. The looks that you get from when you drive the cars. When people put their thumbs up and say nice car, it's a compliment and you get excited about it, so it's good.
Shannon's National Auctions Manager, Chris Borobin, joins us with the latest on the Ford Customline. G'day, Chris.
Hey, Joe.
Go, Chris.
Chris, the Customline, for a 1950s car, I'm not sure that there's any other car that has more universal appeal. It just never seems to go out of fashion. There's always a new generation picking it up. What's happening and where are the high points?
Interesting point. There is, isn't it? We've seen them, change hands amongst generations, and that's a great thing. Personally, I think we've seen some of the later cars have great appeal with the striping on the side. The tricolour cars have had really good appeal, really good stable market, very popular amongst the club scene.
Well, they're the ones that have got the fins and the curved glass, but even the earlier ones, people are after them.
Something about the earlier cars, isn't it? I think the styling also was great. The wood finish dash side at the top of the doors, those type of things, it really had a good look to it, and the side valve engines, a really nice car.
Now, do you think this multi-generational appeal we talk about with the Customline, is that tied in with that sort of rock and roll 50s street cruise sort of scene? Because that would seem to appeal to anyone of any age.
Yeah, look, I think the Customline falls in that bracket. It does. There's a bit of appeal there in that rockabilly scene that we were seeing that in recent years. It's a usable car. You can fit 4 or 5 people in the car, so you can take your mates out on a cruise or on a run.
That's important, isn't it?
Very important, and they can get the cars looking great.
So, and there's the other variation, of course, which was unique to Australia, was the Ford Mainline. Now, that's a very special vehicle because we didn't have any other V8 ute, and in fact, it's unique to the world. So, and that seems to be rising steadily and pulling good money as well.
I think the commercials, we've seen that again in recent years. They've got a good following, and as you said, the Mainline had the V8 in it at great appeal, and the styling was quite nice for its time. So I think most of them we've had through the showroom, we've sold without any issues in the past.
So to sum up with the Customline, still a nice entry point to come in, and there's probably still a bit of growth there.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I think with some of the better cars and the later cars, there's probably some growth, and I even think some of the early cars will come up in value in the future.
And remember, you can get all the latest auction updates on the Shannons Club website. If you like the original race images of the Ford Customline on the show today, you can find them all at autopics.com.au, Australia's most comprehensive motorsport photo archive.
It's amazing, Joe, putting the Customline in some sort of historical context. You put back to the 1950s, Holden was selling the FJ Holden. I mean, you compare the Customline, it must have been like something from another planet.
It was quite bizarre, and we keep on defining the 50s as the era of the Holden, but many Australians don't realise that they built these latest Customlines here in this country, and that was quite something. It didn't happen in too many other places in the world.
It was an incredible car though, wasn't it?
It was an incredible car, and having access to that V8 engine, and because it was made locally, it was actually affordable. When other Commonwealth countries didn't have access to US dollars, we got it because we made it here, and that was the big difference.
Well, it was very much loved in those days, and it's still very much loved today. Thanks for joining us for this nostalgic look at the great Ford Customline. We look forward to your company next time on Shannons Club TV. Bye for now.